Welcome back to the Rabbit Hole Sports Podcast. This is part 2 of our episode on NFL Postseason Contenders, Pretenders, and Disruptors featuring special guest Sal Garcia. Whether you're listening on YouTube or on Spotify, please check our previous upload if you need to catch up. And as always, thank you for joining us down the rabbit hole.
Thanks to everyone for joining us down the rabbit hole. I'm Trevor Hall.
And I'm Calvin Zeljak. Let's get into it. We are jumping into the teams that have not officially clinched a playoff spot, although while we are recording this, the Chiefs and Bengals are playing, and if the Chiefs win that game or if the Broncos lose their game, they clinch the AFC West. So that may literally change as we are discussing this. But for the time being, the Chiefs are the first one in the hunt that haven't clinched a playoff spot. However, based on seeding, they will be the 3 seed. So they'll be after the Dolphins, just for our viewers at home. So we did it out of order just based on clinching, but seed-wise, the Chiefs would be the 3 seed. I cannot lie. For me, this is the hardest choice of any of the teams because I could find a way to make an argument for any of the 3 categories. But I'll say this. I feel like labeling the Chiefs a disruptor is like that sounds gross just because of their pedigree at this point with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. They're not going to sneak up on anybody, even if they're not playing well going into the playoffs. They haven't done anything really in the past, 6-7 weeks that would have you saying, oh yeah, this team could play with anyone in the league. But then they still have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, so it's like, how do you label them a pretender? So, this would be, of all the ones, this would be the one I'd probably want to go last on. But the way it works out, I end up going first. I just want to know, you don't have to give away what you guys are thinking, but I'm guessing I'm the only one this tossed up on what to choose.
Yeah, for sure for me. I know exactly what I'm choosing here.
All
I
right.
mean, honestly, I'm in Calvin's shoes for this one. I'm kind of between the middle for a decision. They can be a contender, but they also can be a disruptor. I don't think they played well, but I feel like a lot of playoff teams don't play well at the end of the season. Like injuries always hit them at this time. A lot of players don't really have the drive to finish the season as much as everyone else.
I
So
do agree that in the NFL, as opposed to other sports, there's a lot less consistency in terms of the champion always being a team that finishes really well. I would agree with that. It was the Eagles that got blown out at home by the Cowboys towards the end of last season and ended up going on a run. So yeah, I wouldn't say them not playing well going into the playoffs totally ruins my perception of them, but just giving a realistic analysis of this team, the spot that, as much as it feels gross to label him as this, I'm going to go disruptor. And, listen, this is not, if you're viewing the Chiefs from the perspective of the traditional Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, what they were back with Tyreek Hill being a team that's, designed to go up and down the field. And that's really the only way they'll play. You're just not looking at the game the right way because that's just absolutely not how this team is built or functions. This is a, I wouldn't say traditional, and I think that's the reason I'm so hesitant to label them as someone that can make noise in the playoffs, is that they're a defensive-leaning football team, yet offensively they play a style that still doesn't seem to play to protect the defense. And I think that's a big problem that a lot of teams run into. I think Lincoln Riley and USC is a great example of that, although I know traditionally a Lincoln Riley team typically does have a really physical run game. But when you're offense is centered around being aggressive from a play calling standpoint and trying to push the ball downfield and get big chunk plays and not really concerning yourself with protecting your defense, when it's a tough day for your defense becomes really, really vulnerable and is playing a lot of snaps. So that's the thing that really is itching in my head and telling me that maybe I should go pretender. But just given the experience the Chiefs have had in the playoffs, I just it's just more than any other team in the league has at this point. And as I'm saying that out loud, though, I do kind of realize that in the AFC, like Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, that's kind of been the landscape in the AFC the past 3-4 years. So, even as I'm saying this, I'm starting to think maybe this is a little more of a, this Chiefs team just doesn't have it. They're, maybe going to win a playoff game at home, depending on their matchup, but aren't going to be anything special. But I'm going to stick with my disruptor feeling, even though I probably just gave the most pretender based argument for them. So you're welcome.
Well, honestly, your explanation kind of helps my explanation, Calvin. They
I'm glad it goes
they
somewhere.
are they aren't the best Chiefs team in the past few years, but they are still good enough to win a playoff game. But I'm scared for Andy Reid when it comes down to like actually having someone to do playmakers with. Yeah, he has Travis Kelsey. Yeah, Taylor Swift. What? I feel like
I
they're
mean,
too
even
involved with
Travis
that.
Kelsey, though, the past, 6-7 weeks, it just has not been the same. And I don't want to, I hate talking about like, I don't want to be the guy ever presenting the narrative that a player's falling off. So I'm going to lean on the fact that he's been playing through injuries essentially every week. It felt like every week, the first 8-9 weeks of the season, he was limping through something. So with that being said, Sal, your point is very accurate. This team is deficient in the playmaker department.
Yeah, and I honestly believe this year's Chiefs team is like how I just explained the Browns. They're going to be the Steelers of 2012. They're going to be either the ones getting upset this year, or they're going to do an upset or two just with their playmakers they have compared to the other teams.
I actually really, really like that just because that Steelers team, you kind of have, I mean, I think maybe in terms of overall legacy on the game, Patrick Mahomes, maybe even at this point, although there's going to be several old heads who would hear this and claim I'm disrespecting Ben Roethlisberger. But from a legacy standpoint, I think Patrick Mahomes maybe has already passed Ben Roethlisberger. If not, he certainly will by the end of his career. But I think that's a really good comparison when you're talking about the fact that both those teams were built around having a really good quarterback and being a stout defense, but kind of using the quarterback as an excuse. I don't want to label it as an excuse, but that's really the best word in my mind to describe it, as an excuse to not find an identity offensively. I think both those teams absolutely share that quality.
All right. I've been a little more quiet, the past minute or two. Look, fellas, I appreciate this. Okay. I appreciate that we're defending the Kansas City Chiefs. I appreciate that we're trying to give them, some opportunities to possibly be a disruptor. But I'm gonna, you heard it from me first. The Chiefs are not doing anything in the playoffs. They're not. This is not the Chiefs' year. This has not been the Chiefs' season. The Taylor Swift or the Travis Kelsey thing is cute, and it's good for the NFL because they really need more
Is
fans.
it?
Jesus,
Is it
I
good for
don't
the
know.
NFL?
That's
We won't get
I
down
don't.
that rabbit hole.
That
I,
debate's up for tosses. Yeah, who knows?
I can't pretend. We're not. I don't think we're gonna have any big Swifty followers anytime soon. I can't pretend that I give any shred of a
Yeah.
shit at
I
all.
mean,
But
listen, all due respect to her, wish her the best. Not the reason I'm putting
absolutely,
on a football game. All right. And
yeah,
I'm glad it's
yeah.
bringing in new fans, but like when she's the freaking profile photo for the league Twitter, what's going on?
I really, I wish it was an NBA player or an MLB player. I wish it was a league that like could always
Did it?
use, like that, like the NBA could always use. look, don't let me get down this whole rabbit hole about how pissed off I am that the NFL had games on Christmas Day because they're trying to take away the
Oh,
NBA standing on don't get me started. I'll turn it into basketball
that
head.
is a rabbit hole that would be pretty interesting to venture because I had the exact same thought,
I'm not
actually.
happy about it, my guy. I'm really not. Anyway, I mean, I'm glad you had the same thought, but the truth of the matter is that Taylor's boo is 968 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's the lead receiver on the team. And
And that's not a great year for Travis Kelce
not a
standards.
great year for Travis Kelce. This
And he's still leading
roster
the team.
and he's still leading the team, right? This is the worst Patrick Mahomes season that he's had since I think his 3rd year in the league, which he sat his 1st year, so essentially his sophomore
And
season.
and a
And
lot of it really goes back to the fact that they don't have well, again, the thing they're trying to make their offensive identity, they just don't have the personnel to do.
well, it turns out you need weapons to be a good team.
And
As
tackles.
Yeah. As it turns out, you need key players at key positions to actually make key plays in key games. Like I don't know why this seems to be just like a constant theme in roster building is that like you have like the not to bring this back to the NBA again, but like the Mavs do this with Luka Doncic. They're just like, I don't know, let's just put like Dwight Powell out there and see because he's so good and he makes everyone better. And it's like, well, if you paired him with someone who was good, then they would be winning Super Bowls. I mean, this is the blueprint is here. The blueprint is to put, Terrell Davis with John Elway. The blueprint is to put Joe Montana with Jerry Rice. The blueprint is to put Magic and Kareem together. The blueprint is not to have one elite superstar in any sport and then just put a bunch of role players around him. You have to have multiple stars in basically every sport to be legitimate contenders, and the Chiefs don't have that. As much as I love Travis Kelce, as much as I love Pat Mahomes, he has not had a good season, compared to other past Patrick Mahomes season. Um, and I mean, I like Isaiah Pacheco, but he's got 800 yards on the year. And yes, their defense is statistically elite, but when push comes to shove, you were saying you might be able to rely on that sort of what's the phrase I'm looking for here? Institutional wisdom, right?
Mhm.
Institutional knowledge you might be able to rely on. But when you really look at the depth chart, especially, I mean, really throughout the whole team, there's a lot of guys who are George Karlaftis is pretty new, and Derek Najee's pretty new, and Mike Dana hasn't been there a long time, and Willie Gay and Nick Bolton haven't been there a lot. Drew Tranquil was not on this team a couple years ago. I mean, it's really Trent McDuffie's pretty new too. I
Well,
know Justin Reed's been around a minute, but
that's
you know,
I think that's a totally different discussion in a way because the Chiefs, when they really won that first Super Bowl back in 2019, were very offensive reliant, and then their defense was capable of getting situational stops, but really
yeah,
throughout the game wasn't a great unit. And they've done a really good job building through the draft. Like a lot of those guys, Nick Bolton, Trent McDuffie, L'Jarius Sneed, a lot of those guys they brought in through the draft, and they've done a really good job developing that defense. But I think the point that I would go with off what you're bringing up here is that the defense doesn't have the experience of being leaned on in big situations like the offense has had. And I think that is something to consider in the playoffs and that I really hadn't taken into consideration. So I think that's a really good point is that this defense is a very young unit. Um, Granted, a lot of their young guys have 2 to 3 seasons now under their belt, and they've been really, really good players. But you are 100% right that getting into the playoffs and being the unit that's leaned on to win games is just a very different scenario. And the other point that I'll retouch on is again, like as much as we like Isaiah Pacheco, it'd be awesome if they had a guy where they could go run between the tackles because the interior of their offensive line with Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey is really, really solid. And I'm blanking on their other guard's name, but he's very good as well. Joe Thuney? Is it Joe Thuney?
it is Joe Thuney, yeah.
Yeah. So the interior of that line is really good, although one of those guys could be injured if I'm not mistaken. But the interior of the line is great, and they don't run a scheme that's, through the middle of the offense or the other team's defense, whatever way you want to look at it, at all. It's still so perimeter oriented. And, I don't think if they run it back with this same group next year, that's a problem. But this year, there's at least a sensible excuse just because this is realistically the same receiving core they won the Super Bowl with a year ago, just minus Juju Smith-Schuster, who granted is, a solid number 3 option, maybe a number 2 for stretches, but is really more of a number 3 guy. So it's not like they had an elite guy leave between last year and this year, but this year the guys they leaned on to kind of step in and fill in for Juju Smith-Schuster have not been well, they haven't met the production they did last year, and they've really fallen off from the production of last year. And that's Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney are the 2 biggest ones. Rashee Rice is at least interesting. He's at least given some games to him and at least give something, but that's a rookie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the playmaker deficiency is super concerning, and it's really hard to argue with the pretender take, Trevor. It really is. And the only thing keeping me from doing that is probably a slight Patrick Mahomes bias. I'll be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's super fair to have that bias because he has been the best quarterback in the NFL for, a really solid stretch of time here now. My apologies to Derek Notchi. He was on the 2019 Chiefs team. He's just a little more of an everyday guy now. Sorry, I'm just looking through the rosters, but yeah, you're right. I mean, they don't have Juju. They don't have Marcus Valdes-Scantling, who, despite everybody's running a straight line takes about him, he is like a veteran who's been on multiple, high caliber playoff teams. They don't have Orlando Brown.
Is he
Orlando.
injured, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, or did they let him go? Because he had that big drop earlier in the year versus the Eagles.
You know what? No, they still have him, and he's active. He's just not starting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean,
well, that's actually another great one to throw in. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, they've all had atrocious seasons, and they were the guys that really were going to be leaned on. And then the Kelsey, again, I want to give the guy credit because he's gutting through injuries and all that. But again, the production is not near where it's been the past few years. So this is, in a lot of ways, barring Patrick Mahomes or Travis Kelce missing the year due to injury, like this is pretty much worst case scenario for Kansas City. So long term, not worried about him, but pretender is, as much as I hate to admit it, probably the right label. And, because I just love mixing it up, that's probably why I chose Disruptor.
I mean, I feel. Oh, I was gonna go for it, Trevor. I was just gonna say, I feel like I agreed with your saying that they're more of a pretender now at this point.
I agree it feels that way, gentlemen. It really, like
Yeah.
how this is the problem with me, right? I said Disruptor, and then everything I've said about them has just been, oh, they can't do this, they can't do that, they've never done this, they've never done that. What am I doing? Am I insane?
No, it's just here's the thing, right? Orlando Brown, stud left tackle, gone.
Yeah.
Juju Smith-Schuster, reliable receiver. I mean, maybe not, a star by any sense of the word, but like a decent receiver, somebody who has hands to catch a football with, gone. Frank Clark, gone.
Even out of the NFL now, unfortunately. He got released for the second time this year.
Yeah. Disappointing. But also, who's the other guy I was thinking about? Juan Thornhill is now on the Browns. So, there's a couple of just key guys that there's a couple of key, not to say that those were the 3 best players on the team, but I mean, it's when you lose key guys in key spots who can and have proven to make those plays, I don't know. I just, and they're starting a rookie now, I think, Wanya Morris at left tackle. Their other tackles are Jawan Taylor and Lucas Niang.
The tackles have been
Tackles
really
are
bad, and Patrick Mahomes has not been the same quarterback, and it's you never want to chalk it up to just one thing, but the lack of ability to protect on the outside definitely has him, even though he's always been, I would argue, not like your most fundamentally sound quarterback by any means. But that situation has gotten to the point where it's like, well, this is kind of a problem, actually, because he's got some really happy feet in the pocket this year. And again, that's always been his thing. But this year, it's just a lot like before, it'd be like, I kind of see it. But now there's a lot of plays where you're like, bro, just you're fine.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think unless either of you gentlemen want to get anything else in on the Chiefs, I have spewed my heart out about them.
I'm done with them personally. Sal, you got anything?
Nope. Chiefs are one and done, I feel like now at this point.
Yeah, I mean, at this point too, they're playing, if the seeding were to be the exact way it was right now when the playoffs start, they're playing the Bills, who already beat them in Kansas City. And actually, I mean, gosh, well, now I'm like talking myself into taking the Bills in that matchup, or the Bills taking the Chiefs in that matchup potentially. But I don't think that win, even if that did happen, would qualify them as a disruptor. But anyway,
I have
we
a question for you fellas
yes.
as we move on, just because I was looking ahead a little bit. I don't mean to step on any toes here, but does anybody really give a shit about the Jaguars or the Colts? Do we have to have like a whole discussion about them? Does anybody really have
Honestly,
about that?
honestly, I was gonna say the same thing, Trevor. No one really cares about the Jaguars and Colts. They're just happy to be here.
I mean, cute. We love these guys. I love Trevor Lawrence. He's a good QB, but whatevs, man.
Yeah,
Gardner
I
Minshew's
mean,
sick. He's a cool guy.
when the Jags were 8-3, very cool, very nice. Would have been really cool to have, are the Jaguars legit conversation. But now, yeah, I'm not buying them too hard. I mean, granted, they played the Panthers today, so unless they lost, my opinion on them wouldn't change today. It wouldn't matter what they did against Carolina, no matter how the
Right.
win looked.
Yeah, they did not. They won 26-0 today.
Yeah,
So
so pretty much as you would expect that to go. Bryce Young got hurt in that game. That's probably another rabbit hole we could go down at some point in the future. But anyway, yeah, Jags. Yeah, for the sake of saving time, I would
yeah.
label them a pretender, and the Colts as well. The Colts, I think. Well, see, this is the problem in terms of another thing we brought up is I think Shane Steichen absolutely could be in the running for Coach of the Year with Kevin Stefanski as well. I mean, if the Colts go 10-7, no one had that.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. He's done a great job. I don't think they're going to really make any noise in the playoffs, but you're
Yeah.
right about that. They've had a great job.
And the thing with them is at least with the Browns, right? We talked about how, granted, Joe Flacco, hopes and dreams for individuals aside, the Browns are a defensively based team and they have an elite defense where the Colts, it's they well, actually, it's kind of ironic because Shane Steichen was the Eagles offensive coordinator a year ago, but I was going to say they almost have an Eagles-like feel this year where it's like they've
Yeah.
found ways to win games without there being like oh, that's what they do really well. Okay, like they run it pretty good with Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. It's not the best run game in the league, but it's good enough. Gardner Minshew's a wild card, so he could throw for 500, he could throw 5 picks. The defense is what it is. They released an All-Pro player in Shaquille Leonard because they couldn't make him fit into their scheme. I don't want to overstate that point, but I think that does say something. So yeah, for the sake of time, that's it. That's all we can say about them, I guess. Perfect. Do we want to have a super in-depth discussion on the Bills? Because for me, they are, well, actually, there may be some dispute here. I think they're a disruptor. I think they're a better version of Kansas City this year. I think Josh Allen has had a better season than Patrick Mahomes this year, and I trust the Bills to, given the way they've called plays in recent weeks, to at least be willing to lean on a running game and not force themselves into a shootout that they can't play in. With that being said, I'm not a big Sean McDermott guy when it comes to playoff coaching decisions. So that's my holdup. But I'm going to stick with Disruptor.
So I'll let you go ahead.
I mean, I'm just gonna agree with Calvin for this one. It's their disruptor. It's kind of the same discussion we were having with the Chiefs. They have potential, but they have a little bit more of a star factor when it comes to playmakers. Like Gabe Davis, he can have a really good game whenever he wants. Stephon Diggs, we've always thought he's always a playmaker, so it doesn't matter what we think about him.
I think
And
the other thing with that too is this year Diggs hasn't been as centralized in the offensive game planning each week. Like he's had a good amount of games consecutively, really, where he's been under 100 yards. And granted, maybe the offense isn't quite as good, but from an overall team perspective, they've been efficient in winning games. So,
yeah, I feel like adding on to that point, Calvin, I feel like them splitting up the ball to different receivers and not just main pointing to one player has definitely helped out their offense. They may have not had the same record they've had in years past, but Josh Allen is such a good quarterback that he's played in certain situations where people have thought he was going to lose that game, but at the end he's ended up coming back and winning those games like without really any playmakers. I thought that he's thrown to Gabe Davis, he's thrown it to his tight ends, his running backs. James Cook's a great receiver back. I mean,
yeah,
the
James
run
Cook
game
has been
isn't
great.
there. He's a great player. I would like if they were to work on their offensive line, I feel like he would be a great top 5 back in the league coming up, but not yet. Give him some time in the league.
I can
But
agree
other
with
than
that.
that,
Yeah, he's been phenomenal. He's over 1,000 yards. He's only got 2 TDs, but he's also such a threat in the receiving game.
I mean,
He's
his
been
brother
huge.
Dalvin Cook took the league from Storm also when he was on the Vikings. Like no one thought he was going to be good when he got drafted, and then look where he was. Like he may have dropped down when he went to the Jets, but still.
Yeah, well, yeah. Dalvin Cook's probably cooked, to put it lightly. But his brother James Cook is doing phenomenal. He's, really trying to. Yeah, he's
He has
almost
potential
like
to be a great player.
he's almost like a. I mean, I know James Cook isn't like a big player, but when I say the player I'm comparing him to make more sense, he's essentially a bigger Darren Sproles in a lot of ways.
Ooh, I like.
Yeah, I would think that too. Yeah, he
Yeah.
does fit that very perfectly, honestly.
That kind of squirm. And then I think both of them also have the ability to kind of stun you with physicality sometimes, where you're kind of so used to that, cutting side to side, running around that, every once in a while they just stick their head down into a safety or a DB and initiate some good contact. So I'm glad you gentlemen are on board. I was sitting on that one.
Yeah, I'm with that for sure. And just to get I think Disruptors, always the bridesmaid, never the bride with the Bills. I just, they're never quite, like I like Dalton Kincaid, and I like James Cook, and I like Diggs. They have weapons, but do I like them as much as some of these other teams in here, like the Ravens or the Dolphins? No. Do I like their defense as much as the Browns defense? No. Do I like their institutional knowledge as much as I like the Chiefs, even though the Chiefs have some younger players on their team? No. Do I like Sean McDermott? No. Like I just nah. They'll win, 2 games and they'll lose, and everyone will talk about how much help Josh Allen needs, even though he's just constantly
Which,
making errors in key situations.
I mean, listen, Josh Allen is. I mean, it's always going to be a fun topic just because of his play style. It's always going to draw the media's attention. But I mean, listen, if you were to put the quarterbacks in the NFL in a vacuum and just, not judge on football knowledge and purely judge on just what they could do from an athletic and physical standpoint, I think Josh Allen is, I think even ahead of Mahomes, is the number one talent in the league in that regard.
Yeah.
I think he's, arm probably any given day you could give it to the other one. Also depends on if you're going to factor accuracy into natural talent or taught talent. But like in terms of straight line speed, Josh Allen is faster. Although maybe Mahomes, maybe you would say, is more elusive, but it's this is the way I think of it. Josh Allen is probably, even though he's a big guy, he's probably got a little more twitch to him than Patrick Mahomes. But Patrick Mahomes is elusive in like a Jar Jar Binks like way, in where it's like he's just kind of flailing around, but it works somehow. And there's an actual martial arts that's based off of, and I can't remember the name of it, but that's just what I think of with Patrick Mahomes. It's just like the most random maneuvers. We were like, oh, that was leading somewhere. That's crazy.
That was a great comp.
For any of our Star Wars listeners.
The last thing that I want to say, and then I think we could probably end the Bills because we got our takes off, right? Sal, you got your take on the Bills, yeah?
Yeah, I just said that they may be disruptors, but it's just so hard to say, especially with what they're dealing with right now. But you had a valid point with them being just pretenders. Yeah, it's just hard to make a valid point for them to make it.
Yeah,
My final,
yeah.
I was just gonna chime in and say my final point here because I want to continue with the old Chargers comps. I mean, Allen is really Philip Rivers, dude. He's really gives me Philip Rivers vibes. Not athletically, obviously, at all.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of this, like, we're constantly like, if Rivers just had one more running back, he'd be so, like, we're just always going to be like, if they just tweak the offensive line a little, maybe they fire the offensive coordinator. Nah, dog. It's just, I love.
The other parallel to that is, I mean, maybe Josh Allen hasn't quite hit. Well, I don't know, because the turnovers have been such a big thing for him. But there was a point in Philip Rivers' career where people were like, oh, is Philip Rivers washed? Like, he throws so many interceptions, yada, yada. What's wrong with him? And then, like, they put an okay team around him, got Keenan Allen, and people were like, oh, yeah, he's good. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, that's
I guess he was
right.
just, yeah. I guess he was just throwing the ball to say Jared Tutu. I guess that was the problem. No disrespect to him because he actually had a very critical touchdown for the Chargers in Kansas City for them to make the playoffs in 2013, but I figured I would pull that name out of the hat.
I appreciate you doing that. I love that guy.
I'm Trevor Hall.
And I'm Calvin Zeljak. Thanks for joining us.
Down the rabbit hole.
Thank you for listening to the Rabbit Hole Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to check back tomorrow for part 3, available at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on both Spotify and YouTube. If that's too long of a wait for you, we have more content on our website, rabbitholesports.com, including our new weekly newsletter subscription starting at just $1 a month for all kinds of sports fans of all levels. Thanks again for the continued support, everyone, and take care.